We're all here. It is 6:15 for our work session on January 25th, so we'll call the meeting to order. And if you would join me in rising for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And if we could have a roll call, please, Secretary Slager.
Yes, Trustee Bowser. Oh, is she here?
No.
Nope. Okay. Trustee Rivard. I see him. Trustee Vanderhyde.
Here.
Treasurer Gilmore.
Here.
Secretary Slager. Here. Vice President Schaffner.
Here.
President Reed.
Here. Thank you. And we have established a quorum. So that brings us to the adoption of the agenda, and I would entertain a motion.
So moved.
So moved.
Is there any discussion? Having none, Vice President Schaffner?
Wrong button. Sorry. Yes.
Secretary Slager?
Yes.
Treasurer Gilmore?
Yes.
Trustee Vanderhyde? Trustee Rivard?
Yes.
Trustee and President Reed? Yes. The agenda is adopted as presented. And that brings us to gratitudes. So I'll open up the floor. Who would like to share gratitude?
I'm grateful for a new semester starting and my kids getting a blank slate of in person.
There you go. Anybody else?
Heidi, this has been a difficult year. I'm thankful for the patients, for the students and the parents, and for the hard work that we've done in order to try to stay in person for as much as possible, but be able to navigate this time and be able to get education going anyway. That is no small task, and I'm sure it's a challenge for the students and parents to adjust. And so I think when we look at 2020 and 2021, there is definitely no challenge like this that I've ever seen, and to have the team we have in place to be able to navigate those times, and for the patients of the parents and students, I'm just truly thankful.
Agree. Well stated. Thank you, Trent.
I would echo that too. Thank you.
So we did receive some correspondence here in the office from Representative Mark Huizinga. He's our state representative for the 74th district. And Representative Huizinga reached out to Cedar Springs Public Schools to properly honor the School Board Recognition Month. Please find the enclosed tribute recognizing your board's dedicated efforts. The role this collection of valued community members plays is an instrumental one in the future success of the coming generations. Thank you for your devoted service. Please do not hesitate to contact me if I can ever be of service to your community. And so Representative Huizinga sent us this plaque that we'll put on display upstairs in the boardroom. So on behalf of Representative Huizinga, thank you to the members of the Board of Education.
That was very nice. Thank you. And I'll follow that up with, I'm grateful for the whole board team and for your service and signing up again and as we going in this year. So thank you too. All right, we will move on to our consent items. I would entertain a motion.
So moved.
Support.
And I'll call the roll. Vice President Schaffner?
Yes.
Secretary Slager?
Yes.
Treasurer Gilmore?
Yes.
Trustee Vanderhyde?
Yes.
Trustee Rivard?
Yes.
President Reed, yes, the consent item is approved as presented. And that brings us to our discussion items. And first up, we have our Cedar Springs Public Schools Extended Learning Plan report with Jen and Chris. The floor is yours.
Absolutely. So this evening, we just need to come together to reconfirm our return to learn plan and how instruction is going to be delivered. So the only items of note that I have there are that January 4 through 8, our whole district was still in remote instruction. And beginning on January 11, we've been back to fully in-person instruction for those who have chosen that fully in-person option. We do have one change to highlight tonight that began today. Due to some of our 6th grade students coming back in person, we've had a small staffing shift there. So as opposed to first semester where we had 2 of our 6th grade teachers teaching fully online, we've been able to bring one of them back into an in-person classroom with mostly the students who have shifted from online to in-person. That causes a bit of a change in the schedule for those 6th grade students, because instead of 2 teachers teaching 4 content areas, you have 1 teacher teaching 4 content areas online. And so as a result, the schedule is linked there for you. It really involves 1 less hour of synchronous instruction, but the same amount of time throughout the day that students are learning. It just puts a little bit more of the onus on them, and second semester is a good time for that change to be happening as opposed to first semester when everyone was getting used to online. So that's the only change in our plan, and I would be happy to document any comments you've heard in the public.
Is there any comments from the board of anything that you've heard that you would want to share? All right. I believe we're good to go.
Well, and then the second part of that is just a report on our attendance. So you'll notice that as we have each month, we're comparing the online students to our traditional learners. And you'll see that the attendance rates are fairly similar across those demographics until we get up into the secondary world. And as we've talked about in the past, we're pursuing some reasoning for that, but we really think that it has much to do with the fact that we often have disengaged learners in our classrooms, and we don't necessarily report them as absent in a normal year. But because of the attendance rules this year, if they are disengaged, not only are they not participating, they're not considered present. So that's just the explanation for that. We are working with those teams in order to make sure that we're providing the right reach outs and supports for families whose children happen to be disengaged at this time.
And this full report is linked into Board Book, so you can have full access to it.
Yep, and the attendance numbers are current through last week in January, so.
Any questions from the board? Okay. We'll move on then. Chris, you didn't have anything else, right? That was the end of that, Pete, right?
No.
Okay.
Thanks, Jen.
All right. All right. So we'll move on to item B, the general fund budget amendment with Chris.
Okay, so last board meeting on the 11th, I presented the general fund budget amendment for the 2021 school year, and nothing has changed since that meeting. So in Board Book, you'll see that presentation as well as the resolution, which is on the screen right now. So any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Any from the board?
Taking action on that tonight as well.
Okay. All right. We have no questions on that. So we'll move on to item C, the Cedar Trails mechanical bids with Chris
Okay.
and Ken.
Thanks. So if you recall, back to December 14th, we presented about these bids. The bid meeting was held the day after our last board meeting, so on Tuesday, January 12th. And this was run through Triangle, taken through the State Sigma website for bids. to meet all of that criteria. We had very favorable results. So if you look into board book, you will see this award and cost analysis of our contractors. For the unit ventilators, again, this is for Cedar Trails. We had two bids. We had Bullhouse LLC come in with the lowest bid, and you can see that here on the screen. After school purchase direct and tax free deduction there, this came out to $121,700 as the bid for the 37 unit ventilators for the classrooms there at Trails. And then the second part of the bid was the package was the chiller for that building, which again, we had two bids. One was from AirTech and the other was from Train. And AirTech was the low bid after the school purchase direct and tax deduction came in just over 87,000. So the details of both bids is on this next screen. I can zoom into that. This is in board book as well. So you can see where these compared, the Train bid for each, and then the Bullhouse and AirTech bid for each. Long story short, in summary, together the total package was, if memory serves, just under $209,000 in aggregate. Yep, right here on the bottom right of my screen, $208,993. We had $280,000 in the budget of the bond for these materials, so we came in at a savings of over $70,000. Very, very excited, and really met the purpose of bidding early that we did this. So if anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer those, or Ken or Scott as well.
Any questions from the board? Okay. I'm hearing none.
I do have one real quick.
Okay.
So now that we've come under by 70,000, where does that 70,000 go in the grand scheme of things?
So, I mentioned it before, but with the next regular scheduled board meeting on February 8th, I will show everybody on the board my document that really lays out, Series 1, Series 2, and how much the document that we took to Treasury that really took this $68 million and lays it out into each project. So, just as with anything, it's a target, and there are going to be some things throughout the next several years that come in hopefully below budget like this, and I'm sure there will be things that come in slightly above budget. So in the ebbs and the flows of the work, and as the ideal world meets the real world, we will take the savings where we can get them. And then in a perfect world, if you get all the way to the end of your bond list and your construction, and you get to the years out and you have some extra dollars, then you can, within the scope obviously of what was voted on in the language of the ballot, we can apply that to other work. It looks like Scott has something to add because he has some experience here as well. Oh, Scott, you're muted.
Muted.
Thank you, Chris. So for the example, the project at the middle school falls within the budget, but the additional bus route out to Northland Drive, that's not within the budget. And so we're holding that back as a contingency item. And so that would be an item that we could either pay for out of excess bond dollars if there is room in the budget for that, or it can come out of the building and site sinking fund account. And so really it just gives us some fluidity and flexibility to tackle some of those contingency items. Perhaps they didn't meet the agenda, or they didn't meet the budget in the original scope of the project, but because of savings in other areas, we were able to move forward with those elements of the project.
Okay, any further questions?
Appreciate the question.
Just a kind of a curious question. You said that this all went through Triangle. I think you said maybe not through, but in conjunction with Triangle.
Mm-hmm.
What is that? Is that process? They're just simply with you going through that bid and suggesting to you what we should be doing, and then you're recommending that to us in turn. Is that basically how that worked?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, they're the experts in the field. So basically Triangle, worked with Ken to figure out which brands of unit ventilators and chillers he's comfortable working with. They have recommendations. And then they put together the technical bid documents that essentially, the folks that are in this field look at that and say, yep, we can provide that service. So they have that expertise that, say, I would not have. But then they provide that to me, and I post it on the state it's called Sigma. It's the state website that we're required to post those out for bids. So it's really a team effort, and they're professionals all the way along. So, and then they came here on the 12th, and I've never done one virtually before, but we held a Zoom meeting with all the bidders, or the four, or the three that were on here, and it was pretty neat. So then we talked to them through that. So in a typical world, they actually come to the building and we open all their bids, their sealed bids, and we open them all at the same time.
And that's done for transparency purposes.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay, thank you. Last call for any other questions. All right, thank you. We'll move on to discussion item D, proposed IRS closing agreement with Chris and Scott.
Okay, so this is an interesting one that has really come up really quickly here since the new year, and this is something where I wouldn't generally think would require a board meeting for, but I'll explain why here in a moment. I actually threw together a little slide deck to. I think it would be best to use this to introduce it. So this is I'll be as brief as I can with this. This is an issue with the IRS working in conjunction with the Office of Retirement Services, ORS, to come to a closing agreement, which I'll explain. So this is an issue. All employees are required to contribute 3% of their wages to the ORS, and that's for their healthcare and retirement. And so it has been a topic of conversation for quite some time of whether or not those wages, that 3% contribution, is FICA taxable. And if you're not familiar with FICA tax, that's your Medicaid and Social Security tax. So both the employees and the employer, Cedar Springs Public Schools, have to contribute 7.65% of taxable wages to the IRS. So long ago, there was some guidance from the ORS that these were not wages. They were, it was a withholding, and so they were exempt from FICA taxes. Some districts took that and withheld FICA taxes. Some districts took that and did not withhold FICA taxes. It's been pretty unclear for years. So finally, right after Christmas, the ORS sent out a notification to districts and said they've worked with the IRS and they've come to they finally, and this is going back to about 2013, they've come to a closing agreement that the IRS would guarantee this was their position for any district that signed on to this closing agreement. Okay. And the closing agreement would be stating that these wages were exempt from FICA taxes. We didn't need to withhold them from our employees and send them to the IRS. Okay. Which is worth stating that Cedar Springs has not, which I was very excited to learn because obviously I wasn't here in 2013. So good decision making. A lot of districts in Kent County did not. So we've been doing it correctly per this agreement. So why am I bringing it to the board? And I apologize, you can't see the top of my slide. So after speaking with Troon, Ian Koffler at Troon, he said he filled me in on this part of the revised school code that decisions to sign agreements such as this with the IRS are the work of the Board of Education and should not be done by a district employee. This is at the discretion of a board through action. And so, and I'll explain this part on an attorney as well. There's been an attorney that's been working on behalf of all the school districts in the state. He's not someone that we have on retainer or a firm that we have on retainer, nor did we obviously have him as part of our organizational meeting. So this is really just a way that we could potentially, if we're going to sign this document, the board would need to take action in doing so. Okay, and does everybody understand the document I'm speaking of? The IRS said, we're going to issue this document Any district that signs it will be protected. If you don't sign it, presumably they could change course in the future and say that we did need to be sending in FICA taxes all these years. So it could be quite an issue. So after going through this with Troon, here's why this is something that we're really not quite sure what to do with yet. There's reasons why we should sign. Obviously, it would provide us protection for how the district's already treated these funds. We've not withheld FICA taxes from our employees, so it's right in line with how we've done it. To give you an example, districts that have withheld FICA taxes from their employees over these years would have to request those funds back from the IRS, provide those funds back to their employees, and presumably issue corrected W-2s to employees going back as far as 7 years. Really a big mess. And we're talking about $55, $60 a year. I mean, not life-changing money, just kind of enough to be a real pain. So very happy with how I've said that before. Very happy with how we've handled this. So that's why we should sign. Also, there's a $3,000 filing fee per district, and that would be covered by the ORS. So it would not come out of our district's fund. Now, in a roundabout way, one could presumably say, well, we're going to pay for it anyways because the ORS keeps increasing the percentage that we have to contribute each year. But we're going to do that anyways, whether or not we're included on this agreement. So that's why we should sign. To make it interesting, why should we not sign? Well, the full contents of this IRS agreement have not been disclosed. We have 3 bullet points, and if you read my second attachment here in board book, you'll see those outlined in there. We have the main bullet points, but we have not seen the full agreement. Neither has Troon Law Firm, and so that's why they're somewhat uncomfortable with this as well. $3,000 cost will be passed on to districts. We just spoke about that. And there's probably a low likelihood the IRS is going to come back and change course on this agreement once they've settled with it, regardless of if districts are signed on or not. So, and this is the last slide, the next steps. This is where this is really just an education for everyone tonight. The deadline for districts to sign this agreement is February 5th. Okay, so we've got 2 weeks. Troon is still drafting up legal formal documents to be brought to the Board of Ed for resolutions. So we would know, those would be created and ready for us to use. Not something that I was throwing together and that would be taking to legal counsel for their opinion. And they're very optimistic, and I'm optimistic to the point that they have told me that they have a verbal confirmation, but nothing in writing, that this deadline will be extended until we can see the full agreement. Or there's always the possibility that we'll be able to see the full closing agreement. It could be revealed at any day. Okay, so the reason I bring all this up is there may be a need, presumably, to have a special meeting prior to February 5th. Again, our next board meeting is February 8th. So if they provide an extension, we can talk about this on our February 8th board meeting, have a resolution, have a recommendation for the board, and move forward. If they do not provide an extension, then we may need to come back together briefly before Friday, February 5th to have the board take action. All right, so I know that was quite a bit. Scott, if you have anything to add, please feel free. But if anybody has any questions, we'll do our best to explain.
Yeah, again, really, we just wanted to get this on your radar in the event that we had to have a special meeting prior to February 5th. But as Chris shared, the team at Troon is expecting an extension and also that a disclosure of the full closing agreement. So that will give us an opportunity to be thoughtful and really take our, give this decision our due diligence and work through the proper steps and channels within a reasonable timeline.
So other districts are going to have the same resolutions put before them that are in this same slot with this.
Correct, yes.
So
Yeah.
most of us are in that boat together.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
Just a question, this might seem like a silly one, but with the deadline of the 5th, has the IRS not released this agreement to anyone, or are we just kind of last in line?
No, they haven't released it to anyone. So there's a letter from the IRS to this attorney. His name is Andrew Wilk, I believe. And it outlines these 3 bullet points that essentially say these, withholdings are tax exempt. And then the other 2 bullet points are about what districts should do if they have been withholding, FICA taxes all this time. But it's not the full agreement. So Troon is just, they're just wary, as they should be, of what else is in that agreement, because obviously you don't want to sign something that you haven't seen the full,
Right.
language of. So
Kind of awkward, but
very strange. I would just say very strange, the timing and then the full disclosure part of it. So hopefully more to come, and hopefully it'll be very clear before we have to do anything.
The ORS needs $3,000 per district to pay the lawyers to do. I'm confused about that number, and I know you probably don't know, but do you have any insight?
Yeah, I'm not sure how they came to that fee, Jeff. I thought that was interesting as well. That's a significant amount of money, obviously, if you think about all the districts in the state. So no, I'm not sure how they came to that amount. But to that point, if 500 districts sign it and Cedar Springs does not sign it, well, our contribution rates are still going to pay for that lack of funding. I mean, it's not fully funded anyways, obviously, and they're estimating 2038. So we're going to be paying for it one way or another. That's the kind of the tricky thing. So very strange. And we can try to get more information on that as it becomes available. I have a meeting tomorrow that I'm hoping to get more information on this as well. So that's a great question. Why 3,000 and where's that going?
so nobody has an in with the IRS to get the whole. I don't know. I mean, the attorneys, it's just weird.
Yeah.
Okay.
It truly is.
All right.
I would hope that Troon or nobody else would suggest anybody should sign this without the full agreement. Is that where we'll head down this path, do you think,
Correct.
Chris?
Yeah, I mean, that's basically what Ian stated to me. They can't, without having the full agreement, they can't recommend that districts do this. Now, I will say, I know for a fact there are districts that are moving forward with signing the agreement without, taking it to their legal counsel, without taking it to their board. That's not how I choose to do business. I want to make sure we're doing everything on the up and up and making the best decisions with everybody involved. So I think we'll get the information we need before push comes to shove.
All right. Well, that was a little bit confusing as the world is these days.
Yeah, and if you want more information, feel free to reach out to me. I do have the IRS document.
Nothing.
As I said, I wrote up a long letter. It's in board book, and I sent it to Scott, and he said, maybe back it off a little bit, keep it a little higher level.
Yeah, and that's not directed at you at all. That's totally
no.
the IRS and that whole thing. So,
I appreciated that.
okay. All right. Any other questions on that? Okay. We'll see how that plays out. So that brings us to the portion of our meeting where we have public comment. If there's anybody that would like to address the board about any of our action items for their 3 minutes or concerns, we would open the floor for that now. Scott, have you received any?
I've got one individual, Liz Johnson, is seeking an opportunity to share.
Okay.
So I will open up for
Okay.
Mike.
Can I stop just a minute? I do see Misty in the attendee spot.
Oh, got it.
So maybe can we see if we can open her up to a panelist and then we can.
You bet. She has been promoted to a panelist. Welcome, Misty. And when we're ready, I'll open Liz's mic.
Hi. Hi, Misty. Hi. Sorry if we left you over on that side. Okay. All right.
Okay, are we ready?
We're ready.
All right. So Liz's mic is open.
Hi, can you hear me?
Mhm.
Okay, hi. Thank you for letting us speak to the board. My husband is here with me as well. For the record, I understand that you guys are between a rock and a hard place. I do understand that, because of the executive orders and whatnot, you guys don't have a lot of leeway or access or flexibility, but I just wanted to bring to the board an experience that my son has had. He's in the 9th grade at the high school. And he's had several times where his mask has either gone below his nose or something along those lines. And he was threatened with suspension, according to him. And it was it's a very stressful thing for him. He's a good kid. He's never been on suspension. He's never, ever caused any type of problems. And let's see, this week he sat down at lunch to eat his lunch. He's able to take his mask off. And then he got up and walked 10 feet to get a fork. And somebody talked to him about his mask again. And they were, according to him, they were very rude about it. Like, somebody that's in charge gave him a scolding about it. And he was stressed over it because the last thing he wants is to be suspended. And to be honest, suspension goes on a record, permanently. And I want to say that I don't think that a mask is worthy, or a mask violation is worthy to put somebody on suspension for, or to even threaten somebody with suspension. Our kids are under a lot of stress right now. And they're doing well. You know what I'm saying? I mean, they're kids bounce back pretty good. But it's just, that's an added stress on our kids. And I just would rather ask that you just please talk to your principals about this. And I'm asking that you just consider the repercussions of threatening suspension because of a mask. If he gets up from his table and walks 10 feet, he's scolded. It doesn't seem to reach that level to me. Anything you want to add? Any questions?
I think you presented your story very well, Liz. Thank you. And we will, Mr. Smith will follow up with you, and we thank you for sharing that experience with us. So know that you were heard.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And you were within the 3 minutes. It was perfect. All right. Do we have anyone else that would like to address the board?
No one else is interested or indicating that they're looking to speak with us.
Okay, so we will move on then with our agenda, and we will put out there, as this meeting is recorded, that our board emails are on the Cedar Springs website. If anyone does wish to contact the board, we do welcome that. So we'll move on with our action items for tonight. And our first one up is the general fund budget amendment. And I would entertain a motion for as presented.
So moved.
Or
Is there any discussion? Okay, having none, Vice President Schaffner,
Yes.
Secretary Slager,
Yes.
Treasurer Gilmore,
yes.
Trustee Vanderhyde, Trustee Rivard,
Yes.
Trustee Bowser,
Yes.
and President Reed, yes. The motion carries. Last action item is the Cedar Trails mechanical bids, and I would entertain a motion.
So moved.
So moved. And support.
Okay. Is there any discussion?
Heidi, the only thing I would say is I did get a chance to go to one of those public forums with Scott last year, and we did have a contractor ask us specifically about the bid process. And so I just want to say, I know we've gotten a couple of bids here. I think we've been very transparent, and I think responded well to that one feedback that we got, Scott, if you recall, from the community. So I just want to thank everybody involved for being very transparent. So that way, as we review these bids, it's open to the public and they can see those. So that's the only comment I have.
All right, thank you. Any further discussion?
Just to clarify, this was for the lower bidder on both. Chris?
Yes. Lowest bidder on both and by quite a margin, so.
And can you just repeat who those low bidders were for us?
Yep, the low bidder for the unit ventilators, 37 unit ventilators, was Bullhouse LLC. And for the chiller, it was AirTech equipment. If you wanted to know what type of companies the actual units are, you'd have to ask Ken, or we could look in the documents. I know they were on Ken's approved list.
So would it be, was the motion could read as was presented to the board and with the note of it's the lowest bidders. Okay.
Yep, I'll put that in the minutes.
Okay. All right, any further discussion before I call for the vote? Okay. Vice President Schaffner,
Yes.
Secretary Slager,
Yes.
Treasurer Gilmore,
Yes.
Trustee Vanderhyde.
Yes.
Oh, got it. Trustee Rivard,
Yes.
Trustee Bowser,
Yes.
President Reed, yes. The motion carries as presented for the Cedar Trails mechanical bids. Thank you all for that work. And that moves us to the portion of our meeting where we have our work session. And this is typically a time where we are a little less formal and we get into our comfy chairs, but we're already in our comfy chairs. So we'll proceed on. And first up, we have Student Services Update with Stacy Voskuhl.
Hello, board. I want to welcome the 5 members of our mental health team, and I'll introduce those in a second. But I just want to refresh your memory about our mental health team. 6 years ago, it was started with, I believe, 3 counselors and a part-time psychologist. Fast forward 6 years later, we have over 15 members on our team that include psychologists, counselors, school social workers, child life specialists, child life interventionists, behavior interventionists. So we have come a long way in 6 years with our mental health team. And today's presentation is going to be 4 different segments because they're in 4 different subgroups, and they're going to talk about what they've been working on most recently with you. So I want to introduce Danielle Paoni. She's our behavior interventionist at the high school. Ben Matthew, our behavior specialist for the district. Audra Holsvenord, our child life specialist for the district. Shelly Perro, counselor at the high school. And Becky Cooey, and it looks like she has a guest with her. She's also a counselor at the high school. So I want to welcome them, and I'm going to share my screen so that they can do their presentation. So let's see if this works. There you go.
Thank you, Stacy. I'll start us off on the next slide. So this past year, our world has felt heavy for 1,000 different reasons, which was mentioned earlier tonight. And because of this, we are seeing deep and complex needs in our students, families, and staff. In order to know where to begin to address the complexity of needs, our mental health team has found it helpful to anchor down in one of our favorite foundations, what we know to be true about how all brains learn, and that is Maslow's hierarchy of school needs that you're looking at here, created in 1943. So it shows us what we need to be in place before a student is available to learn at the top of the pyramid. We know that unintentionally, so often in schools, we end up going straight to the top tier or straight to teaching academic curriculum. But if we don't address these foundational levels, students' brains don't have the ability to take in information and learn. So this is really focused on starting at the bottom of the pyramid with physiological needs, making sure kids have a warm place to sleep and have access to food. Moving up to safety, we know that we need to make sure that kids just don't feel physically safe, but emotionally safe. So do they have access to supportive staff? and routines? Do they feel that they belong and have nurturing relationships with staff and peers? Do they have the emotional skills to be able to even have those relationships? And that they have esteem. So we're building in through PBIS, making sure we have a positive climate and culture. And we know that these foundations need to be in place because then and only then are students remain available to learn. So it takes a lot of intentionality and effort of school staff to address all of these themes. And so to focus on those, we've split up into 4 different subgroups, all doing work towards strengthening these foundations. And we're going to present you tonight on that work. And Ben is going to start us off.
Thank you, Audra. So our group, when Stacy floated this idea to us of cutting our big PLC group into small groups so we could kind of individualize where we're working, one of the things that I had been working on leading up to that was identifying what we're using to drive some of our decisions based on how we're intervening on behavior. And so my group was made up, or is made up, of our school counselors, a lot of our interventionists, our behavior interventionists, one of our child life interventionists, and some of our other counselors from various buildings. So we have representatives from every building across the district. And when we began, what you're looking at in this little chart here just showed the 2 things that we looked at specifically were the number of these behavior plans that we have. We call them PBSPs. And we were looking specifically at Gen Ed. So these are students who are getting most of their support from their classroom teacher and from other supports that are built into the district, like our counselors and our interventionists and things like that. So we began by looking at that and then looking specifically at those plans and where we're getting our information from. One of the things that COVID did provide me with was an ability to look at those kind of with a fine-tooth comb. And I noticed over the summer and at the end of last year that we had a whole bunch of plans with a whole bunch of kids that did not have a data piece behind it. So with that, we were looking at, in some cases, 10, 13 different interventions on paper and no real way of knowing which one's working. We have kids with preferential seating, access to different materials and things like that, but we don't know which things are helping them be successful. And so my group really dug in there and we started looking at what was in place already. And what we've been able to do just since November until January, and we take a monthly snapshot at the beginning of each month. So we'll have another one coming up here soon in February. But we began we were able to kind of trim the fat in some cases where there were some students that had things in place that were not applicable anymore. So we were able to get rid of some plans that were there, and that's where you see that blue line dipping down. And then the other thing that we were able to do is tweak the plans that were necessary and add in a behavior component to those, which really helped us to be able to make decisions on what those students needed and how they needed them. And you can see that trend is going up. That's that red line there. So that one went from just under half of our students with these behavior plans to now we're at over 3/4 of those students. So in 3 months' time, we've really turned a really good a trend. And so we're going to keep working on that as the year goes on. But really the nutshell of what that provides us is an opportunity to then dig into some different interventions. And I'm going to kick this over to Danielle so she can tell you about one of the things that she's working on at the high school.
Hi, I'm Danielle Peony. I'm the behavior interventionist at the high school. And you better believe I've overthought this talk, but hopefully I've pared it down enough to give you a small glimpse about what the district is doing regarding behavior. With evidence-based strategies, we're always working towards, in behavior, we're always moving from a reactive approach to problem behaviors to a proactive, sorry, we can fast forward the slide. There we go. Proactive, preventative, and trauma-informed approach. And for a student, the data that Ben just presented to you represents more time spent in class, more work completion, and new skills taught, learned, and practiced in the context of a trusting relationship. So any new skills taught, learned, and practiced means to a student, now I have options. Because if you don't know any better, you can't do better. If you don't have a better strategy, you can't enlist new strategies. So the time spent with students is spent teaching and practicing this better way, and to identify the triggers to enlist the beneficial behaviors when it counts. I've asked my students how they spend their time if they're sent home, and usually their top go-tos are sleeping, online gaming, and using substances. And I get really curious about those choices because I can't stop a kid from using those escape strategies, but I can teach them how to use new strategies in those times where they feel they just want it to go away. So now the story for that kid is no longer, I can't do this or it's too overwhelming. The story can be one, someone cares. This can go a different way. And now I have a little bit of an idea of how to do that work. So these evidence-based practices that we're using in behavior and intervention across the district are showing a lasting positive improvement for students and staff. And the next slide is an example of one strategy used and one success story for one of our students. The strategy, the tool used here that you see is called the window of tolerance. It's a tool that's commonly used in a trauma-informed approach. And this is a tool I kind of recreated with some common verbiage that we're already using in our social emotional learning lessons at the high school. This regulation tool worked really well with one student in particular who within the first week of school was suspended, and they were acting out of their fight or flight response. That's what took them out of their window of tolerance. And they were sent out on suspension. When they came back, they were first encouraged to identify a trusted adult, and then they were taught how to identify those triggers. And they came down to my room and we worked together on recognizing when they're triggered and learning those new strategies. And now they can identify new choices. And so what that looked like with this student is 3 times for 1 week for 20 minutes each, we taught and learned and practiced these strategies together. Then eventually they were just coming down 2 minutes at the end of lunch to check in. And then now on the days where maybe they had a rough night or maybe a rough morning, they'll come in and check in before school. Now they're missing no school. They're missing no class time. And this student went from failing every class to passing 5. And for 9 weeks straight, they've had no behavioral problems. And 6 of those were actually in person. So that's good. And they just overall have a greater sense of self-efficacy. So the work we're doing with behavior intervention is teaching and practicing new skills to change our mind about how we respond to and interact with our environment. This is the work we're doing, and really it's life-changing work for some of these students in just a simple, meaningful, compassionate exchange at a time. It addresses the whole child for success in school and beyond.
In addition to the great work of the behavior subgroup, we have a community and communication subgroup. So we saw this year, due to the pandemic, an increase in depression, anxiety, stress, and suicidal ideation. So students, families, and staff really needed more school mental health and community resources now more than ever. But due to information overload and virtual schooling and pandemic fog, people were appropriately overwhelmed and they weren't sure where to go to for what. So our solution was to build connection to mental health supports at school and in the community through creation of new resources and a multimodal communication initiative to create awareness, because we wanted to make sure that everyone knew where and how to get the help they needed. So on the next slide, we started our outreach with both creating new resources and disseminating them in different ways to really promote awareness. So overall, our team's support and resources were accessible to all. And we really wanted to break down any barriers to awareness and access to our mental health team members. So we knew that we couldn't just communicate this in one way, right? We needed to adapt our approach and really have a lot of different modes of communication. So we've created a mental health team website, which you all have seen in the past. It's continually updated with all of our resources, but we advertise that in many different modes. So we went to staff meetings. It was part of the onboarding for staff at the beginning of the year. We've encourage teachers to link it to their Canvas pages. We put it on the school website in multiple places. We put it in our signatures on our email of the mental health team members. We got creative with that. We sent to all staff and families in newsletters. And we've seen on average since the beginning of this school year, 70 to 200 hits on our website, mental health team website per week. So we know it's being utilized, which is really exciting. We also created succinct and widely available mental health and community resource flyers, and you see an example of it on the screen right there. We dispersed those in multiple ways as well. We also created a hard copy version of this, and then we put that into 125 boxes at the mobile food pantry and in McKinney-Vento homeless family resource bags. We wanted to have electronic versions, hard copy versions. We really went to see what the needs were. When we heard before the holidays, we've known that holidays are an especially difficult time for mental health needs, especially this year. We were all grieving it looking different. And so this was a time where we knew students and families needed additional support, but for those couple of weeks, they didn't have access to the mental health support team in school. So we really wanted to set them up for success. We created a holiday break mental health resource flyer, educating on what to look for and signs that you or your child might need to ask for some extra help, and how do you do that. So we just wanted to make sure we're setting kids and families up for success and health even outside of our course, right? Amanda Burrell, our community school coordinators, created 2 district-wide referral forms, one for community and basic needs and one for mental health referral needs. We've found it's difficult when people are in stress brain or trauma brain for them to even know what to ask for or to even make that phone call or have the capacity to reach out. So we've also seen a lot of shame this year in asking for help, and we really want to work to break that down. So we've created these referral forms that students, staff, family members, anyone can fill them out. They're super easy to use. And then Amanda will contact them to connect them to resources. We've also done presentations by our mental health team staff on all the topics you see here. We know how important it is to have FaceTime with our staff. So we've gotten creative in presenting at staff meetings and in different virtual modes as well, so that we can continually work to empower people to have the skills, the resources, and the information they need. On the next slide, we wanted to give you just one example. This is just from one school of the work being done by the mental health team there. This is how our high school mental health team has adapted to this year's really unique challenges and some of the innovations they've created. All of the things listed here are also in addition to all of their direct care with students, families, their PBIS work, and their small group work. So they've created a high school mental health Instagram page. They've created a beautiful public Canvas page, which you see a screenshot of here. That Canvas page has all sorts of resources and videos they've recorded. The calendars that you see they've created an entire referral system where students can easily go on there and make an appointment with mental health staff. There's how-to videos that walk students through each step. It's really wonderful. They've been doing Zoom sessions for support. They sent out senior newsletters, and they've even provided social emotional lessons on the following topics that you see listed. So they've done that virtually, sent out to all students, and then when we were in person, presented to every class. So these are just some of the ways that we've ensured that everyone knows when and where to help. And we've really worked to give students the skills they need to be successful, not just within our walls, but out in the world as well. And I'm going to hand it over to the data group next.
Hi, so the data group, we look at all these programs and wonderful initiatives that the mental health team has created, and we try to make sure that we're actively monitoring and improving these programs. We know that with MTSS and school improvement, that constant cycle of looking at the data, looking at the programs, and making sure that we're always continually improving is a really important part of our job. So we're making sure that the programs are have fidelity. They're running the way that they were meant to run and the way that that was evidence-based.
that they're in coordination with the flight plan and the school improvement plan and MTSS. And we're trying to make sure that the communication with stakeholders demonstrates the value of the programs that we have. And then also the social validity, or just what the students, staff, parents, community can see that these programs that we have are valuable. You can move to the next slide. So our goal this year is to identify relevant outcome measures for our current programs. And if the programs don't have robust outcome measures, we want to identify additional data points that we could gather, and then confirm that the data is being communicated with stakeholders in meaningful ways. And then also use that data to create a plan for future improvements. So our process that we've gone through this year is, first we determined some eligible programs that we could analyze. And then we created a program evaluation tool based off the effective innovation review and selection tool that the district uses. So we wanted to be aligned with what the district uses in other ways. And our first round of evaluations has been on the suicide risk assessment, second step, trails to wellness, and true success. And then they're also our mental health website. Those three in the middle, B, C, and D, are the social emotional curriculum that are throughout the district. So we want to make sure that since we have this opportunity to provide a social emotional curriculum for students, we want to make sure that we're keeping the data to demonstrate how it's meaningful, where it's meaningful, and where we can improve it in the future. So we're going to review those using our tool and determine what additional data or communications are needed. And then since we aren't, in our data group aren't necessarily the people that are implementing these programs every time, we're creating a proposal to incorporate the data and the communication for the people that are implementing that. And that's kind of the work that we're doing this year. And I'm going to turn it over to our processes and protocol subgroup, which is Shelley Farrell.
Hi, for those of you that I haven't met yet, I'm Shelley Parra. I'm one of the counselors at the high school. So you've seen just kind of a snippet of some of the wonderful things that we're offering. But we know that we're not going to utilize this or properly utilize it in the way that it's intended if it's not easily accessible, consistent, and up to date. So our goal is to house all of that information and make sure we have everything that can be utilized district-wide in an efficient manner. So we want to have access district-wide to all the same material, which will increase the staff knowledge of our protocols, and then also increase the efficiency in our response to student mental health and behavioral needs. So at times we are needing to work quickly, and we don't want to be shuffling paperwork. The student need is most important, and so that's where our focus needs to be. And so our hope is to have some district-wide access to all of our materials that's consistent and up to date, so that we can focus on the student. Okay, so as you've learned, we do have a very robust team, an amazing team. And due to the increasing size of our team and resources that we have throughout the district, we have a number of both new and established protocols and documents being utilized. And so housing all of this information in one spot allows easy access for staff and admin to the most up-to-date information. And so we've listed some of the new protocols that we've established since we've been here. Some of these things were in place in part, but the protocols district-wide have largely been established, at least in part, with our team. So we have the suicide and self-harm risk assessment protocol, the student threat assessment protocol, the critical incident stress management, positive support plans, Section 504 evaluation process, social emotional learning curriculum, caring for students, trauma-informed practices, and others. So these are just some of the ones that come to mind that really have come to fruition in the last few years. Two big ones that are kind of near and dear to our heart, specifically the suicide and self-harm risk assessment protocol. Obviously, this is a very important one. And as trained mental health professionals, we are trained to know what to do in these situations. But having a district-wide protocol is extremely important and something that's really, I think, probably one of the first things that we really took by the horns when I first started a while back. So that's really, and this is something we're constantly updating. We're always looking at the most up-to-date data, the forms and things that we really need to be the most up to date on. So this has been one that's really grown since the implementation of our team. Another one that's near and dear to a lot of our hearts is the social and emotional learning curriculum that we've really been able to implement a lot more, especially this year, as we've seen the needs grow with our students. And so what I think is unique about our district and others that I had experience with is we're really taking a district-wide holistic approach with this. We're not just looking at our building or our grade levels, but we're really looking at, okay, what are the students getting at starting in kindergarten up through high school, and what's established for them beyond? What do they have access to? So this is continuing and growing. We're looking at really establishing, now we're looking at what did these students get in kindergarten? When did this start? And how can we build upon that later versus just looking at our building and what we think students need? How can we build upon what they've already had? So this has been really exciting for our team. So it is our hope that the new system will provide our district with the most efficient, effective means of accessing valuable mental health resources, especially in times of crisis. As I mentioned before, specifically with the suicide and self-harm assessment protocol and the STAT team, a lot of times this is information that we need access to fairly quickly. So we will hold the editing rights of this material so that everybody has the most up-to-date information, and that will be reviewed instead of having 7 different forms and everybody's made a copy kind of of their own. We will have that housed with us. So that'll be in just one spot, easy to use. We know that's extremely important. They will be reviewed and updated regularly, and district-wide consistency, which is extremely important, and then new employee onboarding to make sure everybody's on the same page with everything that we have in place. And so that wraps up our portion of tonight, but we can at this time take any questions that you might have for the team.
Is there any questions? Go ahead.
Quick shout out to some of our participants. We have 5 members of the mental health team as participants cheering on their colleagues here as they present to the board. So hello, cheap seats. So any questions from the board?
So if you go by your hits on your website, which was 70 to 200 hits, that's percent of students that we have. What is a good goal of percentage, or is there any tracking that way or thinking that way that you can use that to know how many people you're reaching, or is there a goal number?
Audra?
Or what?
That's a great question. Stacy and I were just talking about this week. So currently we only have the free version of Weebly. So all we're able to see is the average. Stacy and I were just discussing that it would be wonderful to be able to possibly purchase the extended version, because then we would be able to see where our hits were coming from, if it was just students or families, staff. And we would be able to look at more of a goal. So originally when we started out, we thought even 25 to 50 hits a week would be a success. And now we wanted to reevaluate because we've seen it be successful. So that's something we're looking at. I'd love to dig into the data more and come up with a goal like you've mentioned, Heidi. So that's definitely something we're considering.
Thank you. I guess we walked right into that for Chris, didn't we? Right into the money part. Okay.
Any other questions?
So when is your...
Stacy, first of all, go ahead.
Well, my last technical question was, when are you projecting the data? The forms will be available to everyone is number 1, and then the data crunching will commence. What are those projected dates?
So the forms are already available to the whole mental health team. It's the housing in one location, making sure we're getting rid of the rest of the forms and looking at all those forms. So all the forms you already saw in that presentation already live and active and have been for a few years, depending on the form. Like the critical incident stress management, that's 5 years old now. And we just keep reforming, reviewing that and revising that as needed. So, but the Cedar Springs mental health team will own and house these forums so that any new staff that come in, it's a one-stop shop. And that's already happening this year. These are all goals and things that are happening this year.
Yep.
Jeff?
Casey, once again, you come in front of us and you bring so much information that I can't get my head around. And I just appreciate you and your team for everything you're doing. And I have one question, and I'll ask that you suggest which one of these people should answer it. I'm in business and industry, and at the end of the day, I know if I had a good day or not a good day. I've got a checklist and I got my things done. And could somebody tell me, how do you know at the end of the day you were successful, you had a good day?
Oh man, raise your hand. Who wants to take that? I feel like maybe Ben Matthew wants to take that. Oh, Shelly Perro, she's unmuted. She gets it.
Okay. That's a tough one. We struggle with that because I come from a background of behavior. I have a strong background in behavioral psychology, which is very data-based, which is sometimes conflicting with what we do because it's difficult to track exactly what we do and the success of what we do. So it's troubling sometimes when I come out and I know that I'm sweating and haven't had a drink of water. And I know that I've been working really hard. That's hard. And so we're constantly striving to try to find a way to do that. We were actually just talking about this the other day. Becky came up with a form on how we could, because we have to balance, how do we track that what we're doing is successful without taking away from what we're doing? Because we don't want to spend all the time on the data that we should be spending with students. And so we were trying to think of a quick, efficient way to say, okay, I did this today, and can we compare that, let's say 4 times a year or however many times a year or across grade levels to see where we're spending our time and if we're being successful. So, of course, it's always great to get positive feedback from students, when you have that email from a student or parent or somebody telling you or somebody face-to-face expressing their gratitude and what an impact that you made. Obviously, that is something that can't be measured. That is the most valuable form of feedback. But we like to see that what we're doing is successful. So that's where we kind of go to that data piece. Kind of backing up back to Mrs. Reed's question as well. At the high school specifically, we've been kind of measuring with our social emotional learning curriculum, which we've always tried to plug into advisory, which was a very short period of time to get all of that in. And so what we did look at was how many kids are accessing that curriculum when we deliver it ourselves and we're delivering that information to them versus maybe a teacher delivering that to them, or even when we're virtual and we're pushing that out to kids, how many kids are accessing that on their own. What we're finding, of course, is that more kids are engaged in the material when we're right there with them, which we would assume to be true. But that also lets us know where our challenges are. Is we know it's hard to reach students. It's hard for all of us to reach students when we're virtual. So that the gap that we saw in the students that we were not reaching while we were virtual or that weren't accessing our material that we were providing, we know that's an area of growth for us. So we're just constantly striving to find that data to prove that what we're doing is good, even though we know in our hearts that it's working. We do like to see those numbers as well.
Thank you, Shelley. As you can see why I'm so proud of this team, and I talk about it every time I get in front of the board. So any other questions, or Ben, did you want to add anything? Okay, any other questions for the mental health team?
One final one, where the calendar was, and they can make an appointment and click on it. I think I heard it right. So are those kind of full, or how's that work? Is that academic and mental health, or so it's academic too?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. So they can, we have snippets in there that's because they're small, they're shorter appointment times, usually for academic, and then they can sign up for a chunk of them if they feel they'll need more time. And then they have other ways to access us too. Obviously, if there's an appointment that's not available in the time that they need, we have processes set up where they can go down to the office and somebody assesses the urgency of that need. So they can be seen sooner if needed.
Okay, thank you. All right, anything else from the board?
Any other questions? So something just to also highlight is some of the members of the team are also special education staff, which means they have a full-time position and they're doing the mental health thing on top of it. So they're school social workers who are mandated through their IEP time minutes and supports. And they're still able to work through this PLC and work on this PLC, do the CISM process, do the STAT process with me, work through all those procedures. So this is a strong, dedicated team that I'm proud to be part of. So thank you, board. Thank you, mental health team.
Thank you. Thank you for the big COVID push too that you've had to endure. It's a lot. And there's been the normal stuff. It's just been a lot, and we thank you for that. All right, we'll move on to the academic services update with Jen Haberling.
All right, good evening. Once again, I'm going to share my screen, and Steve Jensen, who is our MTSS coordinator, and I are going to walk you through an update on our multi-tiered systems of support processes that we are working through as a district. And we'll end with a little bit of a data walk here at mid-year. So Steve, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. And it is really challenging to follow the mental health team. They are amazing in what they do, and I will try to do my best here. So yeah, I just wanted to give a brief MTSS update regarding the progress and just the status of where we are following my last status report that I provided in April. So our district MTSS communication plan includes these reports out to the board at least twice yearly. So that will just be a continual communication loop just to keep you aware and updated on the things that are happening in the district as far as MTSS goes. And this first slide is just a visual reminder that underneath that MTSS umbrella and framework really includes almost everything we do educationally here in Cedar Springs. So it's not just instruction and curriculum, it also includes our screening and assessment systems. It includes our ongoing data reviews and database decision-making, our continual improvement process, all of the team-based structures that help to support and align all of those educational components. So, you know, under that MTSS umbrella, we really are organizing and structuring almost everything we do here within Cedar Springs. Just a brief reminder there.
So we also like to consider how this overlaps with our flight plan work. And I've highlighted for you the different goal areas from flight plan, from our strategic planning, that really align with exactly what Steve is talking about. And you can see that almost everything aligns with the multi-tiered systems of support work that we're doing. That work really is all about positive behavior, which you heard quite a bit about from our mental health team, but also about great academic support for students. So our goal is really that 80% of our students are able to be successful in the gen ed curriculum in their general classroom when their teacher has great tier 1 instruction. Currently, we're operating, and you might have seen my update this morning that I sent out early. We're currently operating with that triangle completely upside down. And so this MTSS systems approach is really going to help us get so that we are with 80% of our kids at the bottom base of that triangle in the green, and very many fewer receiving additional supports, whether in their classroom or in a different modality. So you can see that Steve is exactly right. This work connects absolutely to everything that we're doing.
So this is a really great piece of data that I am excited to share with everybody here tonight. The district capacity assessment is a tool that we use as a district to monitor our ability to sustain and support MTSS to reach those long-term positive outcomes. And you'll see that in September of 2018, when we began this work, we did not have much capacity at all, which is to be expected when you're just starting a new initiative. But you'll also see that those numbers are trending steadily upwards every time we go through that assessment tool with our KISD coaches. I am particularly proud and want to point out that that stretch between January 2020 and October 2020, when we increased by 20 percentage points in the midst of the COVID shutdown and an infinite number of other competing priorities. So that is really an achievement that we can take a lot of pride in as a district, and just the commitment and the support that we've had there. We have an updated assessment coming in just about 2 weeks. And I know just by looking at our data that that number will begin to approach 80%, which is, the research tells us that's the threshold for maximizing our outcomes for our students and our families. So this is just a really, really positive trend that we can draw from. Current status of implementation. These are really just the highlights and a very condensed version of what is happening across the district. So all of our schools, K-12, are in their second year of implementation of the positive behavior supports. Our first year was rudely interrupted, but we are continuing that work this year. Our elementary schools are participating and did participate in the fall in a very structured training around tier 1 reading systems. And what does the science of reading tell us are effective reading practices, and how do we put practice in place to ensure that our students are proficient readers. And then the remainder of this year at our elementary buildings will be spent installing some of those components and planning for the work that will come in the future.
You might remember hearing a presentation from Tricia Schenefeld and Julie Van Bergen. It was in the spring, I believe. It might have been just before COVID, regarding the science of reading and the work that we were moving into. So this is a continuation of that work. And then, oh, go ahead, Steve.
Sorry, I think this one was mine.
Yeah.
We also implemented a new reading assessment this year called Acadience. And Acadience is really a universal screener for our students K-5. It looks at just the basic foundational early reading skills. It's also a very effective and efficient progress monitoring assessment so that we're able to frequently monitor the progress of our students to make sure that the instruction that we're providing is really having a positive impact. And then Jen has been working really hard to align our professional learning plans with the needs that we've identified through staff surveys, through feedback that we've gotten from staff from previous professional learning, and from just what our data is showing us, both academically and behaviorally.
So our next steps include instituting an ongoing data review and merging that work with our continuous improvement work. So you've heard me present before about MyKIP. That's really going to be an acronym that I own, and it will be merged with our MTSS work. So what we're doing in MTSS is continuous improvement. And so those goals that we have under MTSS will become our school improvement goals. And we'll be working strategically all in the same direction on those goals. It will include looking at data 3 times a year. We're also starting at the elementary level, a data dialogue conversation that will happen after the beginning of the year data, after the mid-year of data, and then to make some plans for the end of year data in terms of what our students are showing us about their challenge areas and their strength areas. We will continue to strengthen our elementary tier 1 reading systems and our positive behavior intervention systems across the district. At the elementary level, I'm excited to share with you that we are considering an integrated reading resource that would include science and social studies in the literacy block, and it would be all in one package. So our elementary principals are working diligently with their teams, and we have some planning coming up in the next several weeks where we'll be looking at other schools that have done this to learn from their journeys. And then starting to work on some resources that address the science of reading, but also the knowledge gap that our students have because we don't have a solid science or social studies resource set at this time. So those are our next big, humongous steps. Those will be big work that we'll be engaging in.
And for the remainder of this year, our trainings through the KISD will start to move into the tier 2 level of supports for academics and behavior, both at the building level and the district level. So this is just some formalized training that will help us to structure our supports that we're providing for those students that have a little bit higher level of need. And then we're also really closely looking at stakeholder input through the MyKIP process. We're actually beginning to look at that input at our PD day that's coming up on February 12th. So we'll be excited to look at that and see how we can use that input to help guide our PBIS and our positive school climate practices.
So I also wanted to share with you the most recent data set as of Friday. We still have about 5% of our students who are finishing up their iReady assessment in reading and math. And thanks to Robin for pulling together this data for us. You also have this document shared from earlier at the beginning of the year. So the first column right here is where students, what percent of students were above or at grade level when they took the assessment at the beginning of September. If you remember, the extended COVID learning plan asks that we report this data out at least twice a year, and we determined that it would be best for us to report it out 3 times a year so we can really check at the mid-year point, are we on track and are students making growth as we would expect? So this next set of columns here is our data as of Friday afternoon, and perhaps even a few data points that might include this morning because students were still finishing that up. So you can see that our students are making progress in both reading and math. When we compare this to the national progress that we're seeing, we're actually outpacing the national averages that we're seeing. And I'm glad to dig in a little bit deeper. We're going to have our teams look at this data on February 12th so that they can come up with some action steps in order to end the year with a positive plan forward for how we will ensure that all students are learning at grade level for reading and math. And that's really our update tonight. We would welcome any questions that you might have for myself or for Steve.
Jen, just what you covered on the previous chart, it looked like there was a significant jump with the online learners in math. Can you comment any more about that or as to why? I mean, it's awesome. But very noteworthy. That's just a huge, a huge jump there.
Right. So first, we would like to think that our teachers are doing a fantastic job in all settings. But also we have to note that the testing scenario for students online is not the most reliable setting for students to be taking a test. So as we noted in September, oftentimes they might be getting additional help or having accommodations that they normally would not have if they were testing in person, which might lead to less independence and an inflated score. I would have to dig in a little bit deeper to that data set to see if those students are progressing as they did in years past, or if there is something that's happening in that online school that we ought to be talking about for our in-person students as well. And since the data set is so fresh as it's this morning, fresh off the press, I haven't had a chance to dig in quite that deep, Tracy, but I would be glad to report back on that once our teams have a chance to really take a peek.
Okay, yeah, thank you. I was curious. I mean, you hit on exactly what I wondered, if it was those outside helps or was there some magic formula there that would
It's
be really helpful
possible.
for everyone
Yeah,
else.
exactly. Yeah, I think it's possible in either direction. And I think it just warrants us looking more granularly at the data at student by student rather than this. This is a very broad sweeping the whole district in one bucket. And we do have a chance to look at it student by student so that we can see really, what's the progress looking like and how might we explain that? And if there are things that we need to learn from one another as teachers, then let's go, let's do that.
Any other questions?
Jen, you mentioned these numbers are outpacing what you're seeing in the national averages. Are you referring to the current grade level percentages, or are you referring to the growth in from the first assessment to this one?
Yep. So we haven't received the national numbers for the winter benchmark. And I would imagine that, well, we have an appointment with iReady in a couple of weeks in order to be able to see that information. The county has done some work as well. And we just received that on Friday to be able to see what is the countywide average. I'd be glad to send a graph over so that you can take a look at that. What I do have, let me just find the right screen here. Oh shoot, I may have closed it. I do have the chart that we looked at. Let's see if I can put my fingers on it real quickly. The chart that we looked at in the fall, which had the iReady data displayed. Here it is. And this is the one that I'm referring to, and I'd be glad to do another report on this if you are interested once we have those national numbers. So here is what I am referring to. In the fall, we were outpacing the national numbers at most levels, and this is year-to-year comparison. So what you're seeing is all the way back to 2017 in the fall. How were our kindergarten and first grade students doing? And then fast forwarding all the way to this current fall to see, are we similar to a non-COVID year, which is really helpful to consider. Our teachers are doing fantastic things with their students and have really streamlined what they're teaching to the essentials, knowing that their time is limited because of the great work that our learning acceleration teams did this summer. So it's entirely possible that they have really prioritized exactly the right things that actually reduce the learning loss that we're hearing about in the media quite a bit. And I'd also like to point out that the term learning loss when we're all in a global pandemic is kind of silly. Because of course everyone has learning loss. It's not like the students in Cedar Springs are different than the students in Sparta or Byron Center or Caledonia or fill in the blank with any district. Every student has experienced some changes this year and some challenges that are unique to the COVID pandemic. So what we can see with these national averages really is that our students are typically doing at or above the national average for what we expected in the fall. And I'll have the chance to fill in the winter national averages coming up here in the next several weeks once we meet with curriculum associates for them to give us our reports. Oh, and I should probably show you math too, because there's a whole nother subject area that's really important, and that's math. So here's the math version of that. So when I say that 80% or more of our students are receiving some kind of specialized intervention, you can see that's a combination of looking at who is in the yellow or the red. Those are students who are below grade level and not progressing as we would expect them to. We would like to buck the trend completely and have at least 80% of our students in the green and just set things on fire here in Cedar Springs so that our students are wildly successful coming out of our schools.
Any other questions? Okay, so here's a hard one, Jen and Stacy. How do you balance the mental health with that catching up and getting everybody in the green so they don't feel There's already stress because of the pandemic. There's already stress because of the weird learning environment.
Yeah.
So what does that balance look like?
I can
Don't
tackle that one a little bit, Heidi. Part of it is from providing our kindergarten through 5th grade students with a knowledge-rich curriculum that gets them curious and interested and provides them the opportunity to learn how to read and have number sense coming out of K 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so that by the time they get up into the middle grades in high school, they've built a strong foundation. What we know, if you read my message from this morning, is that if a student is struggling in kindergarten, they're going to be struggling in 5th grade and beyond. And so we want to prevent that. And that's the whole idea behind the MTSS work, is that we're providing the right level of support early on so that we guarantee, and science shows us that, 98% of our students can learn to read if we're using the right curriculum, if we're using the right instruction. And so that's where we want to get.
Thank you. Yeah. Any other questions?
Well, I would just ask, based on that, do we have to wait 12 years then to see the labors of our fruit come? How does that work?
I sure hope not. That's a long time. No, the plan that we're talking about right now is about a 3-year plan before we would start to see a bigger swing upward in our trends. So that's what we're hoping for, and actually have a meeting on Monday in a week to start planning that work.
And I think it's also important to go back to when Audra talked about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, to Heidi's question, to balance that academic rigor with that social emotional piece. If we're not getting the social emotional piece right, the academic rigor is not possible. And so this whole, this whole evening's discussion around the mental health supports and acknowledging who our students are as learners and what they need as learners is critical. It's the critical foundation to helping them be successful in the classroom. And so to Heidi's question, simply, it's doing everything that everyone has talked about tonight to the best of our abilities, and knowing that, human beings are complex regardless their age. And so what we know about today, we're going to learn from what we did today, and we're going to be better tomorrow. We're going to apply what we learned from our students and our work today to those new challenges that come tomorrow. And each and every day, we're going to strive to get better. That's as simply as it can be.
Okay. Thank you. All right.
You're welcome.
End of our questions. Thank you for being here and all of that work. All right, moving on for the next item is our high school design playbook review with Chris, Ken, and Scott.
So Ken has been having some struggles with his internet. And so Chris and I will take this. If we've got any questions, I can call Ken in, or we can take them tonight and then follow up with you in our meeting on February 8th. So I included the playbook with you from GMB. We gave you some information at our meeting on January 11th, but the images were rather small. And so what this playbook does is provide you with some larger images so that you can get a sense of what we're looking at doing at the high school. So starting on page 6 of the playbook, the current slide that I've got up that I'm sharing is the current building as we're using it at this time. So the next slide in the playbook is this slide, which again, this highlights just the first phase of construction at the high school. So it addresses the 12 classroom addition. It also addresses the increase in size of the cafeteria area. And it also creates an opportunity for us to provide our students with a student support center or a student resource center that's shared with the office. And so the classroom additions would be here in the front of the building where the current office area is, up here on this end of the wing that faces and extends out to the north into the east, and then the Library Media Center here in the middle of the building, and then also the cafeteria and this new space that we will be constructing here. So just breaking it down into some smaller digestible bits. The first piece is the schematic design around the construction of 8 classrooms on that existing hallway that extends out to the north and the east. So a very simple structure, some stairways out to the far end, both restroom facilities on both floors to increase capacity in that area. And then the 8 classrooms, 4 on the second floor and 4 on the first floor. We'd also do some work around the foods lab area and create some further opportunities in these other classrooms, both on the first floor and the second floor as they currently exist. So that's kind of part 1 of the classroom additions. Part 2 of the classroom additions, again, and we've talked a little bit about this, converting the existing office space into 4 additional classrooms, but each of these walls that we would construct between the individual classrooms would be removable. And so this could really be a space that could easily accommodate, 120 people if we had all the room dividers open, or it could be 2 spaces for 60 people, or it could be a space for 90 and a space for 30. So it gives us a tremendous amount of flexibility to use these 4 classrooms, both during the day and after school. So our thinking here is, if we have programming in the auditorium or in the gym, we could also provide opportunities for these spaces to be used in another flexible area. Or if we were looking at doing some nighttime classes or doing some early middle college classes, these spaces will be a very well utilized part of the building structure throughout not only the school day, but also during the extended day as well. So the yellow block that you see in the center of the diagram is really that extended cafeteria block. This line illustrates the current window wall structure, but what they're looking at doing is adding additional square footage to expand the seating capacity out by bumping that wall out to the south and to the west. And then this would be a new structure that they would be looking at putting into play. This would actually become a multi-purpose space. It would serve in many ways like the current library does, but it wouldn't have the stacks of books. So what we would have is another system. We would have a book depository for students to be able to engage in the books that we have in the library, but also many of the library books would be moved out into classroom libraries. So we're still providing our students with access to print material. We would just be doing it differently. And then this multi-purpose space would serve twofold. One, it would serve large groups as the library currently does, but it would also serve as a space for students to go during lunchtime for additional seating. And so we're really excited about the dynamics at play within these new spaces of the cafeteria. And then this is just a larger view of how we would repurpose the current library space to provide supports for our student services team, our counseling team, as well as our building administrators within that large space right in the center of the building. And we would also do some work to make very clear where the entry point of the building is. Right now, if you look at the building as you drive up from the north into that event parking area or into that student parking area, at first glance, it's difficult to see exactly where the front entry point is of the building. It's a little bit confusing as to whether you go in to the entry point for the gym and auditorium, or if you go into the entry point to the middle of the building. And so what we want to try and do is provide a greater flow of traffic into this core section of the building as well. And again, we just wanted to provide you with some big picture early on renditions of what those additional classrooms might look like on the northeast wing, or northwest wing, excuse me. And we're still at that point where none of these ideas are fixed and locked in. We're still massaging our thinking and really trying to vet how we utilize the space. The next big step in our process, and that's where we're working right now, is on the budgeting side. So we've got these ideas. We think that they're in line with the budget, but now Triangle and the team there is really taking a hard look at what we've been thinking about to see how it would work with the actual numbers that have been budgeted for each of these facets of the project. So do you have any questions, or Chris, do you have anything that I've left out?
Oh, I think you did a great job with all of that. Just a reminder from the previous board meeting that this is all work, like Scott said, that we're going to really iron out, kind of come up with a finalized game plan for in the next month or two, or throughout the spring, because this is work we want to bid by June, and then begin having the construction take place probably on that northwest addition in September. So we're getting there. And the very cool thing about this is that a lot of this, for the most part, can be done during the school year. I mean, that the extension, the new build on the end of the wing, that's all construction that can take place during the school year. A lot of the office renovations will be challenging, but can be done. And then obviously the cafeteria and that work will be finished up, hopefully during the next summer of 22. So this is all complete for the beginning of the 22-23 school year.
It never goes as fast as we would like it to go.
Right.
So does that
Scott,
anyone have any questions?
As we've talked about, we're planning for 15 to 30 years in the future. Is that kind of what the outlook is?
Correct. So at least 15. Yeah.
At least 15, right. So have we had some sort of studies or estimates as to how many students we will need to be able to accommodate in 15 years? And if so, where do those numbers come from?
Sure. So Chris, I don't know if you want to take this, or I can take it.
Yeah, well, I can start with it. We look at numbers from Kent County birth rates and kind of can go off a little bit of that. I know some work was done before I started here to kind of look at where our trends were headed with enrollment. So, using that, some historical figures and looking at the birth rates, obviously there's a lot of room for growth up here. That's, I think, where we were at to know that we needed to grow and needed to create more space.
When you go to the Treasury Department for approval of ballot language, you're only able to use projections 5 years out for the scope of a given project. And so, we'll be constructing spaces. So our current capacity at the high school is right around 900 students. So we'll be adding 12 more classrooms onto the high school. And if you think, okay, each classroom will support 25 students, we're adding capacity from an academic perspective for, another 300 students. The big question becomes, do you have enough capacity in your support areas? So is your cafeteria big enough? Is your, you have enough bathroom spaces? All of those other things have to be factored in. So there will be a time, likely if we continue to grow at a 2% rate of increase, we're going to have to come up with some different solutions realistically in the next, 12 to 15 years. But at that point in time, it could look varied. So maybe, maybe we build an 8-9 building and high school is just 10, 11, 12. Or, we build a targeted or a focus school. So maybe it's a STEAM school, or maybe it's, we just really need to keep our options open and keep our head on a swivel and be responsive to the needs at that time of our students and our educational program.
Any other questions? Guess not.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for sharing. All righty. We'll move on then to our last item in the work session, the COVID-19 update. Mr. Blood, you've been waiting a while now.
Yeah, just, it's not with the very little coverage that it's getting in the news now. I thought it would be good that we could give you some sort of an update on COVID, because we just can't talk about it enough. But so I do promise that this will be very brief, but I want to just give you some information on where we are with the county, where we are with Cedar Springs, and be able to answer any questions that you might have. And so when we look at our numbers in comparison to before, when we went fully remote before, our numbers are still pretty good, and we have some fluctuations. Today was one of those days where we saw some movement with quarantine and so forth, but really the other one started to return, so the numbers kind of balanced each other out as well. So just to remind the board of what would cause a student or a staff member to have to stay out of school would be really three things. They're either displaying symptoms that are considered concerning symptoms of COVID, and we just don't know if they have COVID or not, and they need to quarantine until either they get a negative test result or they get a doctor's alternative diagnosis for it. The other ones could be that they are in close contact with someone who tested positive, and close contact, again, 15 minutes within 6 feet. And then they would have to quarantine. And the last one, of course, is testing positive. So if we look at our staff, I mean, we clump the close contact and tested positive together. Really, these numbers are from Friday. We have 2 more that we added today, and our students are about the same as what they are right now, even though I couldn't really give you the final numbers yet because they're still being finalized in Power School. So I don't really have those for today until probably tomorrow on that. So I'm sharing with you what we see on Friday with that. But it really looks pretty good. Now, like I was saying before we went fully remote, we had probably 200 or so from the high school alone. And so, and I'm talking about students. And that was really a trend that we saw and we're seeing that with staff as well. And that's why it spurred us to have to go to fully remote. We know that there's a number of people who have concerning symptoms. They get tested and they find that they have a negative test result, then they can return back to work. The problem with that is getting the testing, getting our results back sooner, and so that we can get the teachers back in the classroom where they're going to be the best for our students. And so Kent County has developed some regional sites that are going to only test school employees in the county. And so our staff, if they are exhibiting symptoms, they can go to one of these regional sites and be able to get in faster. And it's saliva testing, which is more accurate and quicker. And they will be able to get their results sooner and then be able to return back to the classroom if they have a negative test result on that. And right now there's 3 sites. There's a 4th one coming, and they can go to any of those sites, but they have to be having symptoms. It's not because they are are quarantined and they want to see if they're testing positive or not. It's the purpose is to get people results quicker. And the nice thing about being quicker is that I actually have access to what is known as PEG, the Patient Education Genius, and that allows me to be able to see our staff's results without having to wait for them to get it, bring it in to us, and so forth. I can see it as soon as it's available. In theory, it hasn't happened yet because we're just added online to this, and I haven't seen the results yet, but that's what it's meant to do with that, to speed up the process even more. The vaccine, we have a lot of information that's given to us, and then we find out that there's a change, and it's a fluid time, and we just have to kind of go with the flow of that. And so it started out with that any teacher could sign up for a vaccine through Spectrum, and then we had a number of people being able to get in and get their vaccination, but not everyone was able to do that. And so Spectrum has changed some of the ways that they're doing things with it, but it's also because we're learning, and because as a county we're trying to develop the most efficient way to vaccinate a large number of people. And so what they have done now is they've kind of assigned school districts to one of the three health systems. You have Spectrum, you have Mercy, St. Mary's, and you have Metro. And so Cedar Springs was assigned to Spectrum Health. And so what I had to do was give a list of all of our employees that wanted to receive the vaccination, and so that they could have that information and be able to set up a what I understand is like a clinic where they can all just come in and get the vaccination and so forth. Well, that part hasn't happened yet because of the distribution struggles that we're having with the vaccine, but I can see that occurring throughout the district. I've heard of other districts having that set up. I know Thornapple Kellogg has had it, and I believe Granville might have done it as well, but it's something that's coming. But I know that a lot of our staff already are signed up through the county. They're also signed up through Meyer and other areas, and really it's just wherever they can get vaccinated, they're able to do that, and then just not schedule if that time comes together for Spectrum and Cedar Springs to do that. And then lastly, as you know, EPSLA, our Family First Coronavirus Response Act, FFCRA, expired in December. And but we recognize how important it is for our teachers to be in the classroom, to be with our students. And if we need a sub, that's good, but it's not something that we want to have in a prolonged period. So if we have a teacher who is quarantined and they have to be out for 10 days, having a sub versus having a teacher in that classroom with the students is, we really want to make sure that we have the people that we have hired to be working with our students, and even if it means working with them remotely. And so what we have done in response to the expiration of the FFCRA is to come up with this stance, is that if you are on quarantine or isolation, but you're able to provide synchronous instruction, you know, that's the live instruction to our students, but doing it through remote access, then we will count that as a work day, as it should be. And you won't lose any of your sick time or be charged any accrued time leave. If you can't do the work remotely, synchronously, then we would have to have a sub. We'd have to charge you sick days for that. And so that's our way of being able to say, we're trying to find a way to make sure that we can have our teachers in the classroom with our students, even if it means it's done remotely in that way. we have come to a letter of understanding that we just worked with the CSEA on that lays this all out as well.
And that's something that we'll bring to the board for their discussion and action at the meeting on February 8th. So we didn't want to add it to the agenda for tonight in that it was such a last minute shift, but we will bring that to you on February 8th for your discussion and then action if people are confident in the language.
Can I ask a question, Matt, before you leave this slide? So if I'm a 6th grade teacher
Yeah.
and I'm home in quarantine, but I'm not sick, I can teach with Zoom. Who's with my 6th grade class?
Well,
Yes.
that's where, yeah, that's a
Okay,
good
okay.
question, Brady. That's where we would have to get a sub to be there and to be the, you know, the hands of the teacher in the classroom. But then the teacher would be providing the instruction and
Okay.
so
So we're keeping the teacher in contact, but providing supports. Got it.
yes.
Okay. Perfect.
Yeah.
Well, it's good for this time we're in. How's that?
Yeah.
Nothing against Zoom.
Well, we know that providing the instruction remotely that way isn't as good as having the teacher in person, but it's better than having a sub just carrying out some lesson plans to get them by for 10 days, you know.
It's still the connection of who they know. I agree. Any other questions from the board for Matt? Okay. All right. Thank you, sir. All right, that moves us on to communication. And for the Board of Education, I don't have anything specific. I think we're up to speed. So Scott, I will move to your piece of communication.
Perfect. The only other thing that will be coming, we want to put it on your radar for the February 8th meeting, is we also have a tentative agreement with our support staff union in terms of an extension of their current contract for one more calendar year. And so we'll be bringing that to you in detail. Chris and Matt have done an outstanding job working with them to work through some financials that create a win-win situation to get us one more year and get us out hopefully through the end of the pandemic. And we'll be bringing that to you on February 8th as well for both discussion and action if the group is ready, or we can move action back to the end of February to give us a little bit more time to think through it if there are any questions.
Okay, thank you. All right, so for planning, our next meeting is February 8th. And one thing, Chris, if you could let the minutes show that Misty was here. She just was in the other side of Zoom, so she's not absent.
Okay, yep, that's a great point. Now, when we brought her in, I put it in the minutes as Misty joined the meeting at, I don't, 6:46, I think at the time. Would you like me to go back and include it from the beginning, or is that okay?
You say, Misty, what time you want? We didn't see you over there.
I was here, but just not like on the video.
Yeah.
So
my only question about it, and not to take up anybody's time, but we did have some motions at the beginning that did not get supported by Misty.
Okay.
And so that's why I didn't go back.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Okay, I'll leave it as is, and then I'll send it out and we can.
We'll blame Zoom. There we go.
There you go.
Okay, thank you. All right, so our next meeting is February 8th. We will probably be in Zoom. We'll keep our eyes on how that goes. And a lot of that is for transparency and ease. Not that we all don't want to be together. So with that, I'll say good evening, and we will adjourn the meeting at 8:14. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good
Thank
night.
you.